Welcome back to my Zero to Hero Myth of Empires Throne Guide series. In this video, we're going deep on Apocalypse Orbs. What they are, how to get them, how to upgrade and improve them, and most importantly, which affixes are actually worth prioritizing. We've done real in-game testing on every major stat, so you don't have to guess. If you want to stay up to date with my latest guides, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and consider leaving a thumbs up and comment so you can show your support. Let's get into it. What are Apocalypse Orbs? Apocalypse Orbs are equipable gems that add powerful stat bonuses to your character. Each orb can roll a variety of attributes, from flat combat stats like critical hit rate and melee weapon damage to conditional passive abilities that trigger during combat. Orbs are stored in a special inventory called the Exquisite Box. That's the tab to the right of your regular inventory icon, and are managed through the Apocalypse Orb panel. You can equip up to 5 orbs simultaneously, one in each dedicated slot. All 5 combine their bonuses together, and you can see the full combined total on the Resonance tab. The 5 orb types are the Core Orb, the Noble Stella Orb, the Wisdom Stella Orb, the Earthfield Orb, and the Earth Core Orb. Each type occupies its own slot. There are 3 main ways to get Apocalypse Orbs. The first is Lucky Pouches. As you farm resources across the world, you'll earn Lucky Pouches, and higher tier resources tend to drop more of them. Opening a Lucky Pouch has a chance to grant an Apocalypse Orb appraisal box. These pouches appear to be time-gated, so consistent farming over time is more effective than trying to rush them. The second method is the market. Appraisal boxes can be bought and sold freely on the marketplace, making this the fastest route if you have copper coins to spend. Opening an appraisal box gives you a random green or blue quality orb stored directly in your exquisite box. Additionally, this is a great way for players to earn some copper coin daily. The third source is dismantling. Any orb you're not going to equip should be dismantled rather than left sitting unused. Dismantling is the primary way to collect the upgrade materials needed to strengthen your best orbs, and we'll cover that in detail later. Apocalypse Orbs come in 4 quality tiers: green, blue, purple, and orange. Green is the common starting tier with 1 affix slot and a low refinement cost. Blue is uncommon with 2 affix slots and a moderate cost. Both green and blue can drop directly from appraisal boxes. Purple is rare with 3 affix slots and a high refinement cost. You'll need potential stones to reach this tier. Orange is the top tier with 4 affix slots and a very high cost, requiring significant investment but giving you the maximum number of stat bonuses per orb. The key thing to understand is that higher quality doesn't just mean better stats, it means more affixes. Each additional affix slot is another stat bonus on that single orb, which is why raising quality tier is so important. The Apocalypse Orb panel has 6 tabs, each handling a different part of the system. Resonance is where you equip your orbs and view the combined total of all active attributes. Upgrade is where you spend enhancement stones to increase an orb's level, scaling up all attribute values. Maximum level is 20. Potential is where you use potential stones to raise an orb's quality tier, unlocking additional affix slots. Refine is where you spend refinement stones to re-roll an orb's affixes and value ranges. You can lock up to 3 affixes at a time to protect them. Dismantle is where you break down unwanted orbs for upgrade materials. And Inherit, also called the Seal tab, is where you preserve your best orbs to carry into the next season. Upgrading is done through the Upgrade tab, using enhancement stones. Each level scales all of the orb's attribute values proportionally. Every stat grows together. The maximum level is 20. To give a sense of the cost, upgrading from level 1 to level 20, you will cost 891 enhancement stones and 178,000 copper coins, with small but consistent gains per each level. Costs scale with higher tiers. Potential development raises an orb's quality tier using potential stones. The progression goes green to blue to purple to orange, with each step unlocking an additional affix slot, from 1 affix at green up to 4 at orange. The primary way to get potential stones is by dismantling orbs you don't need. Every dismantle yields potential stones, so the loop is simple. Open appraisal boxes, dismantle the orbs you won't use, and invest those stones into your best ones. As a reference point, raising an orb from green to orange costs 155 potential stones and 80,000 copper coins. Costs scale with higher tiers. Refining uses refinement stones to re-roll an orb's affixes, both the types of stats and the value ranges within those stats. Think of it as gambling. Each refine gives you a new random set of attributes within the orb's quality tier. The key mechanic is locking. You can lock up to 3 affixes at a time to protect the stats you want to keep while re-rolling the rest. Locking adds extra refinement stone cost, but lets you iteratively work toward your ideal stat combination. A good strategy. Lock your best affix first, then refine until a second good one appears, lock both, and continue. This keeps your best rolls safe while giving you control over the outcome. Refinement stones come from Silk Road missions, defeating Zizou bosses, and dismantling orbs, though dismantling gives only a small amount. Dismantling is the material engine of the entire orb system. Any orb you're not planning to equip should be dismantled rather than left unused. Dismantling always yields potential stones for raising orb quality, and a small number of refinement stones for refining sessions. If the orb was upgraded, it refunds all enhancement stones and 50% of the copper coins spent. Use batch dismantle to filter by quality tier or conditions, like whether an orb has been upgraded or whether any affix is within 90% of its maximum value. This lets you safely break down junk orbs without risking your keepers. Apocalypse orbs are one of the very few systems in Myth of Empires Throne that persist between seasons, making them a long-term investment worth taking seriously. To carry an orb into the next season, open the Inherit tab and seal it before the season ends. You can seal 1 orb of each type: Core Orb, Noble Stella, Wisdom Stella, Earth Field, and Earth Core. This does not require upgrading the tally order. After the season transition, attributes are fully preserved and carry over unchanged. The orb level resets to level 1. The orb becomes bound and cannot be listed on the marketplace, and there is no character level requirement to withdraw your preserved orbs in the new season. Previous season orbs are inherited automatically, no extra action needed. Now let's talk offensive affixes. And this is where your choices get more nuanced, depending on how you play. Our testing confirmed that all offensive damage affixes route through the status damage attacker layer of the damage formula, mirroring exactly how resistance affixes work on the defensive side. But not all offensive affixes are created equal. Melee or ranged weapon damage affixes are your top priority if you're committed to one weapon category. Our testing showed melee weapon damage amplifying at a dramatically higher rate than its stated value suggests. A 1.8% affix produced an 11.8% gain in status damage attacker. At max roll of 3%, that projects to roughly 590 additional damage per hit. This is the strongest offensive affix we tested by a significant margin. Damage type specific affixes, slash, piercing, blunt, chaos, are your second priority, but only if your weapon deals primarily that damage type. These tracked at around 1.5 times their stated value in testing, with a max 5% slash damage roll projecting around 230 additional damage per hit. Strong, but narrower in application. PvP damage sits third. It applies universally to all damage types regardless of weapon, but amplifies closest to its face value. At max 3%, it projects around 146 additional damage per hit. Lower ceiling than the others, but the broadest coverage. Now here's where Season 2 changes everything. Season 2 introduces hot swapping between professions mid-session, which fundamentally changes how you should think about your orb affix choices. If you're locking into a single profession like Tiger Step, which deals primarily slash damage, stacking slash damage affixes on top of melee weapon damage is the optimal combination. You know exactly what damage type you're dealing, and you can build around it. But if you're planning to hot swap between professions, say switching between a slash-based melee profession and a piercing-based bow profession, those damage type specific affixes immediately lose value. A slash damage orb does nothing when you're playing archer. In a hot swap setup, melee weapon damage and ranged weapon damage become your best investments since they cover the entire weapon category regardless of damage type. And PvP damage becomes more competitive as a universal option that works across every profession and weapon you cycle through. The bottom line, before you invest heavily in refining damage type affixes, ask yourself how committed you are to one profession and one damage type. If you're a dedicated single profession player, stack weapon damage first, then your primary damage type. If you're building for flexibility across multiple professions, weapon damage and PvP damage will serve you far better than damage type specific affixes that only work half the time. On the defensive side, the same logic applies. Your orb choices should reflect how you actually play and who you're actually fighting. The universal defensive foundation is PvP damage reduction. It applies to all incoming PvP damage regardless of source, making it the most flexible defensive affix in the game. It doesn't matter what weapon the attacker is using or what damage type they're dealing, PvP damage reduction is always working. This is your safest investment if you're playing in mixed PvP environments where you can't predict what you'll be fighting. Damage type specific resistances, piercing, slash, blunt, chaos, are stronger in raw value, but only against that specific damage type. At max roll, these project around 113 to 117 damage reduction per hit, compared to around 71 for max PvP damage reduction. That's a meaningful difference, but only if the attacker is actually dealing that damage type. If you're fighting bow users, ranged weapon resistance is your priority. Bow professions like Archer and Silverwing deal primarily piercing damage, so stacking both ranged weapon resistance and piercing resistance simultaneously gives you 2 layers of protection against the same threat. Our testing confirmed both apply through status damage taken independently with no diminishing returns, meaning they stack cleanly for maximum effect against ranged attackers. If you're fighting melee-heavy professions, Tiger Step and Berserker deal primarily slash damage. Imperial Guard deals primarily slash and pierce. Knowing what profession is dominating your server's PvP meta lets you target specific resistances for maximum return. A slash resistance orb is dramatically more valuable when half the server is running Tiger Step than when nobody is. If you're being crit frequently, critical hit rate reduction and critical hit damage reduction become high priority. Critical hit rate reduction directly reduces how often you get crit, while CDR reduces how much damage those crits deal. For Persian armor users with sand armor stacks, these 2 affixes also feed the dual defense and anti-critical rhythm passives, creating a compounding defensive system that rewards heavy investment. For regular armor users, CDR still provides solid crit protection at around 11% total reduction, just without the passive amplification. If you're running Savage Blood, your HP pool itself becomes a defensive consideration. Higher max HP means more Savage Blood bonus damage output, so profession HP value affixes serve double duty as both survivability and offense. The breakpoint is 15,000 max HP, where Savage Blood caps at 2.5% damage per hit, roughly 377 bonus damage at that threshold. Building toward that breakpoint makes HP affixes far more valuable than they appear on paper. For hot swap defense, building across multiple professions, keep in mind that different professions have different HP pools. Imperial Guard sits at 12,677 base HP, while Archer and Silverwing sit at 11,207, a gap of nearly 1,500 HP. Flat profession HP value affixes add the same amount to every profession equally, so they scale well across hot swap builds. Profession HP percent, however, applies to a sub-value and gives inconsistent results across professions, already a weak affix and even less reliable when swapping. If you're hot swapping between a tanky melee profession and a lower HP range profession, resistance affixes become even more critical on the range side since you're giving up the HP buffer of your melee profession. PvP damage reductions, universal coverage is particularly valuable here, since you can't always predict what you'll be fighting when you swap mid-session. The practical hot swap defensive recommendation: lead with PvP damage reduction as your universal layer. Then add the resistance type most common in your server's meta, and let your CDR affixes serve as passive synergy through dual defense and anti-critical rhythm, regardless of which profession you're currently running. Here's something important to understand before you commit your refinement stones to any particular orb setup. There is no universally correct build, and anyone telling you otherwise isn't accounting for how PvP metas actually evolve. Myth of Empire's Throne PvP is fundamentally an arms race. The moment a particular build becomes dominant on a server, players adapt to counter it. Orb affixes are one of the primary tools for that adaptation, and the season persistent system means these investments carry real long-term weight. The sand armor example perfectly illustrates this. A player running Persian armor with 15 sand armor stacks, a high critical hit damage reduction orb affix, and the dual defense and sand fission passives active is an extremely hard target for crit-focused builds. On a crit hit, they're absorbing around 18.5% critical damage reduction between sand armor, their orb CDR, and sand fission. On non-crit hits, dual defense is generating an additional 4.1% final damage reduction. Anti-critical rhythm then fires after each crit hit, building up to 4.55% anti-crit rate for 40 seconds that stacks with their existing critical hit rate reduction orb. Stack all of that together and the high crit chance, high crit damage build, which is one of the strongest offensive archetypes in the game, is being actively dismantled by this defensive setup. Their entire damage multiplier is being eaten by a system specifically designed to punish it. So what's the counter? If you're running a crit-focused offensive build and you're hitting a wall against sand armor players, the answer isn't to build more crit. The answer is to shift your damage profile entirely. Drop the crit damage investment and instead build toward high base damage with flat damage type affixes and melee or ranged weapon damage. A high base damage build doesn't care about crit multipliers. It just deals consistent heavy damage on every single hit, bypassing the entire CDR and dual defense ecosystem because those passives are most valuable specifically against burst crit damage. Pair that base damage investment with increased survivability, resistance stacking, PvP damage reduction, and enough HP to survive the initial engage, and you've created a build that trades the ceiling of crit burst for consistent pressure that sand armor can't fully absorb. And then the cycle continues. A player running consistent base damage with resistance stacking is now vulnerable to a different threat: high crit builds with PvP damage affixes that can burst through a resistance stack before sustained damage matters. Which means crit builds come back into the meta, which means sand armor becomes valuable again. This is why recommending a single meta build is impossible and frankly irresponsible. The correct build depends on who is dominant on your specific server at this specific moment in the season. The players who succeed long-term aren't the ones who copy a build from a tier list. They're the ones who understand what each affix actually does, recognize what the current threat is, and know how to adjust. What this guide gives you is that understanding. You now know that resistance affixes counter specific damage types, that CDR and sand armor shut down crit builds, that base damage affixes bypass crit dependent defensive layers, and that HP investment has hidden offensive value through savage blood. Use that knowledge to read your server, identify the threats you're actually facing, and build accordingly. That adaptability is worth more than any fixed tier list. Let's do a quick recap before wrapping up. To get orbs, farm lucky pouches for appraisal boxes, or buy them directly on the trading post. Orbs are stored in the exquisite box, not your main inventory. Equip orbs through the resonance tab. You have 5 slots, and all equipped orbs combine their stats. Upgrade uses enhancement stones to scale all stat values, up to level 20. Potential uses potential stones to raise quality tier, green, blue, purple, orange, unlocking more affix slots at each step. Refine uses refinement stones to re-roll affixes. Lock up to 3 at a time to protect your best ones. Dismantling gives you potential stones and a small amount of refinement stones. Upgraded orbs refund your enhancement stones and 50% of your copper coins. Season Inherit. Seal 1 orb of each type through the Inherit tab before the season ends. Attributes carry over, level resets, and the orb becomes bound. For offensive affixes, weapon damage first, damage type specific second, PvP damage third, adjusted based on how many professions you're running. For defensive affixes, PvP damage reduction as your universal base, damage type resistances against your server's meta. CDR if you're running Persian armor with sand armor stacks. And remember, there is no single best build. Read your server, know your threats, and build to counter what's actually killing you. That's the complete breakdown of Apocalypse Orbs, from how to get them all the way through how to build around them intelligently. If this helped, drop a like and subscribe for more Myth of Empires Throne guides. See you in the next one.